Today is Monday, 5th of August, 2019, and this is Glendale Water and Power Commission. Let's start with the roll call. Madam Clerk, please.
President Avanesian.
Present.
Commissioner Carrasco.
Here.
Commissioner Kadikian.
Here.
Commissioner Lau.
Present.
Commissioner Watson.
Here.
Next item, please.
2. Consent items. 2A. Approval of the minutes for the July 1st, 2019 meeting.
Commissioners, are there any comments?
Just that my last name has 2 R's and 1 S. That's it.
Yeah. Anything else?
I have no comments.
So,
I moved.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from July 1st.
I second.
okay, it is approved. Let's go to the next item.
3. GWP Commission staff comments.
Is there any comments?
No, I don't have any comments.
Is Steve on his way, or is he going to miss the meeting today? Is Mr. Zern going to be joining us today?
Mr. Zern's at a meeting off-site.
Oh,
So I'm
okay.
filling in for him today.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Did any other commissioners?
Any comments?
No comment.
Okay.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, I'd like to take a moment. I was not present for the last meeting, and I just wanted to sort of give a round of applause and congratulations to the Commission and to the City Council for completing the IRP process and the Grayson Repower process. I was thinking back, I actually watched the meeting remotely, and I was thinking back to the dark and stormy night, and it actually was a dark and stormy night when I attended the scoping hearing. It was one of those days of torrential rain in Glendale, and I was driving across town to go to the scoping meeting, and by the time I got there, I was terribly late. I walked in, and it was a room full of consultants, and I was, I think, one of 3 or possibly 4 community members who were present. And given that I, at that time, was working in CEQA processes in other cities and other municipalities, I was concerned because I wanted to see more people there. Even though I know that that all the proper notifications had gone out, it can be really hard to get people's attention when these big, important processes are being launched. You jump up and down and want to get people to engage, but it's actually really difficult to get a community to mobilize on a project like this. So I just wanted to give a round of thank yous. I wanted to thank Councilmember Paula Devine for giving me the opportunity to serve and to participate in this process. I feel enormously privileged to have been able to do that. I would like to thank the former commission members who were here when the whole IRP and Grayson projects were being discussed, especially Matthew Hale, who made the motion to create this idea of the RFP process that would go on then to the council and lead us to where we are today, and Manuel Camargo, who was also on the commission. I'd like to give a round of applause to each of you for your contributions to the process. President Avanesian, Commissioner Kadikian, Commissioner Carrasco, Commissioner Watson, for your work on this. I mean, it's been a heavy lift. To the GWP staff, I wish Steve Zern was sitting there because I'd like to really thank him. I spent months, years peppering him and pestering him with questions, and he always answered my questions. And I know that he and Mark Young and all the other GWP staff made themselves available to the community when people were coming to them with questions. So I want to thank them for that. And I'd really, really like to, if I could and if it were appropriate, I would stand and applaud for the citizens of Glendale. And to Dan Brotman and all of the folks who came together in the Glendale Environmental Coalition for engaging with the process, and what I would call constructive conflict, right? And coming when a proposal was in front of them with dissecting it, examining it, responding to it, really engaging in deep, meaningful dialogue about how we were going to move our city to a cleaner, greener future. I think each one of the people who came to speak, who came to the hearings, who wrote letters, who filled out a comment card, everyone, thank you so much. This is how the process is supposed to work. It's supposed to be an iterative process where people really engage deeply and discuss what's in front of them respectfully and with an eye to, in the end, coming together around a better project. And I think that's what happened here, and I'm so proud of our city. It's not perfect. It's not going to make everybody happy all of the time. It's a compromise, I'm sure. I'm sure there are people who may still be disappointed about some aspects of it. But, you know, I'm here believing strongly that we have taken a big step toward making our city a cleaner, greener place to live and cleaning up the air for the surrounding communities and helping to save the planet. And I don't know, what do you think? I just talked a whole long blue streak there.
So,
I was just going to say like 5 sentences, but once I got started, yeah.
You didn't leave anything for us to tell.
Oh, come on,
So,
come on, wait. I mean, is it just, it's not just me, right? It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And
so you were
and,
not here,
yeah.
but your soul was here.
My spirit was here. I was rooting for all of you so much, and I thought you did an excellent job. And
Thank you.
yeah, I mean, this is a big deal. This is a big deal, and I think it's going to be noticed by the wider world that we've done this. What do you think?
Thank you for your comment. I just want to, before going forward, I just want to thank all city workers during this hot weather. They did a great job, and outages were really limited. And do you have any comment on that? Why it happened and how it was tackled?
First of all, President Avanesian, so my name is Michael DeGhetto, Chief AGM for Water, and I'm filling in for Mr. Zern today. And the comment I would say is that we all appreciate those sorts of comments, thanking us. You know, our staff really do work 24/7 when it's required, and they work diligently to keep the power on, to keep the water flowing and safe. So I think that's my main comment, that, you know, even though turning on your light switch or turning on your faucet, it is important for us to get feedback, that there's appreciation for that. So thank you.
Yeah, but I have a following question. Is there any way to avoid this happening next year?
You know, it's part of what we do all the time, is maybe to see how our equipment is maintained, what kind of led to outages that did happen, and then come up with a plan to do work to prevent that kind of stuff from happening again. So that's just, you know, part of our sort of day-to-day work at the utility, is to look at those sorts of things.
Thank you.
I actually just have a couple of comments too. I will also reiterate your comments there, Commissioner. Yeah, it's on.
Oh.
On really thanking this commission. I also too watched via live stream, and really want to thank you for the heavy lift and dialogue amongst yourself, the city, and the community. So very thankful on the process and the pathway that we're headed. I also too want to thank the staff, and more importantly, the updates. I was following along during the recent outages online with the Twitter feeds, and I think that's so important, where people go online and get their news on how important it is, what to expect. And in most cases, we don't know when the lights will come back on, but just having information that GWP is on it and has knowledge of the issues, and keeping a constant update is important. So I saw that. So I want to thank the staff for that.
Commissioner Carrasco, yeah, thanks for that feedback as well. Not just, I think, the line staff that were working on the outages, but even our communications folks like to hear that feedback as well. Because, they're professionals and they work hard on that. So, thank you.
Is there any other comments? Okay, let's move forward.
4A, Public Health Goal 2019 report.
President Avanesian, members of the commission, I'm going to call up Mr. James Sines, our water quality manager, who's going to give us an update on the public health goal. And I think during his update, we'll get a better idea of what that public health goal is, which is a little bit different than what we're going to talk about in the next presentation.
Good afternoon, President Avanesian and members of the commission. My name is James Sines. I'm the Water Quality Manager for GWP, and this is the 2019 Public Health Goals Report. The purpose of this report is to comply with the Health and Safety Code, Section 116470B. We are to identify each contaminant detected in drinking water that exceeds the applicable public health goal between the years 2016 and 2018. We disclose the numerical public health risk, identify the category risk to public health, and describe the best available technology. Public health goals, or PHG. PHG is a level of a chemical contaminant in drinking water that does not pose a significant risk to health. PHGs are not regulatory standards. However, state law does require the State Water Resources Control Board to set drinking water standards for chemical contaminants as close to the PHG as economically and technologically feasible. In some cases, it may not be feasible for the state to set drinking water standards for a contaminant at the same level as PHG. The technology to treat the chemicals may not be available, or the cost of the treatment may be very high. The state must take these factors into consideration when developing a drinking water standard. When calculating a PHG, the California Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, or OEHA, uses all these information it has compiled to identify the level of the chemical in the drinking water that would not cause significant adverse health effects in people who drank that water every day for 70 years. OEHA must also consider any evidence of immediate and severe effects when setting the PHG. For example, cancer-causing chemicals, OEHA typically establishes the PHG at a 1 in 1 million risk level. At that level, no more than one person in a population of 1 million drinking that water daily for 70 years would be expected to develop cancer as a result of exposure to that chemical.
Excuse me. Can you explain what that abbreviation stands for, PhD, for our listeners?
PHG stands for Public Health Goals. In this presentation, I will list the 3 contaminant levels that have been detected above the PHG level: total coliforms, nitrate, and tetrachloroethylene, or PCE. Total coliform bacteria are an indicator organism and are naturally present everywhere and are not generally considered harmful. They are used because they're an ease in monitoring and analysis. If a positive sample is found, follow-up sampling is required. It's difficult, if not impossible, to ensure that a system will never get a positive sample. There is no PHG for total coliform. The state of California uses an MCLG, or maximum contaminant level goal, which is set at 0%. The US EPA determines an MCLG similar to how California determines a PHG. The total coliform MCL specifies that no more than 5% of all coliform samples collected from the distribution system in any given month can be positive. So during 2016 and 2018, GWP collected between 148 and 185 samples each month for coliform analysis. In this time frame, the highest percentage of a positive sample in a single month was during 2016, with the result of 3.14% samples present for total coliform that month.
So can I just clarify, does that mean that 3.14% of the tested samples tested positive for that contaminant? Or that percentage of the water that was contaminated was 3.14%?
The present number of samples collected. So 3% of all the samples collected that month. So it probably comes out to about 6 samples out of
Okay.
100.
Had the contaminant present?
Was present for total coliform, but follow-up samples came back absent for total coliform.
Okay.
And when it comes back positive, what's done about that?
So once we get notified of a positive sample, we therefore resample that location and five service connections upstream and 5 service connections downstream to kind of identify if that sample actually was, 1, present still, and 2, moving in a certain direction.
But what's done to prevent it or to stop it and to take away any risk?
So to prevent total coliform positives in the system, we maintain a chlorine disinfectant. Throughout the week, our section continuously monitors chlorine levels throughout the system, throughout the storage reservoirs, and if we notice that that level is not high enough where it needs to be, then we'll either add more chlorine, or 2, we'll flush the system to kind of move that water into that direction.
Do we have a constant culprit area, one that always shows up positive? That may be.
There is
kind of
not,
showing.
Commissioner. There's not one area that's kind of defined. Usually our areas that are difficult to maintain a residual are the higher zones, just because of the amount of water needed to stay up there and to feed a certain area. The turnover might not be as fast as we want. So we would kind of monitor and add chlorine in areas like that. Next up is nitrate. Nitrate in drinking water at levels above the MCL can be a health risk for infants less than 6 months of age. Drinking water at levels above the MCL can interfere with the capacity of infants' blood to carry oxygen, resulting in serious illness. Symptoms include shortness of breath and blueness of skin. The MCL and pH for nitrate are set at 10 milligrams per liter. In 2016 and 2018, GWP detected nitrates above the MCL at Foothill Well at 11 milligrams per liter. We operate this well, we operate New York Reservoir under a nitrate blending plan, meaning this well gets delivered directly to a reservoir where we blend with metropolitan water, and that water is monitored daily for nitrate levels. The operation of this causes the concentration of nitrate to be lower than the MCL and able to serve.
I'm sorry, nitrates or inorganic nitrates, where do they come from, or what would they be?
So in this area, the cause really of the elevated nitrates would be from the irrigation of that area. So years ago, there was a lot of farming, and which caused that level of nitrates to, I guess, soak into the ground and end up in the drinking water. Fertilizers, stuff like that. So the area where Foothill is located is in the La Crescenta area, and that area is, years ago was high in irrigation and farming.
Where is the Foothill Well?
Foothill Well is located on Foothill Boulevard between New York and Dunsmore.
No. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. It's on Foothill Boulevard, right up there.
James, before you start, and just like James mentioned, this well is like a pretty small well, and it goes into a very large reservoir. And part of the treatment in our permit to operate from Division of Drinking Water, like, requires us to blend it. So it's treatment, it's a form of treatment, is to blend it with other water.
Just a clarifying question. So the Foothill well is not directly fed into residential drinking water?
No, not at all. It goes into a reservoir first, and then from there, the reservoir serves the area below the reservoir.
That's correct, yeah. The well is directly pumped into the New York reservoir. Tetrachloroethylene, or PCE, is a colorless organic liquid with a mild coliform-like odor. Its greatest use is in textile industry and has a component of aerosol dry cleaning products. The pHG for PCE is 0.00006 milligrams per liter, and the California MCL is 0.005 milligrams per liter. PCE was detected at Glorieta Well 3 at 0.0025 milligrams per liter, Glorieta Well 4, 0.0011 milligrams per liter, Glorieta Well 6 at 0.0012 milligrams per liter, and the Foothill Well 0.00064 milligrams per liter. Although these results exceed the pHG for PCE, they are well below the MCL. The category of health risks associated with people who drink water containing PCE above the MCL for many years could experience an increased risk of cancer.
Just a question before you move on. Just for the comparison purposes, do you guys, maybe it's an idea, you can get some sparklet waters and Arrowhead water and compare what kind of contaminants are in those compared to what we have? Do you do anything like that so that we have a kind of a perspective as to where we are and where others are?
Well, we do have a comparison with other water utilities. As far as bottled water companies, usually bottled water companies set up their operation and pull water from the distribution system of the water utility. So their operation will pull water from GWP or any other city water, run it through a couple filters to make the water taste better, remove chlorine, and kind of make it smell better, and bottle it and distribute it. They don't fall under drinking water standards. Bottled water companies fall under the FDA. In their standards, and I believe their required testing is not as extensive as a drinking water utility.
Commissioner,
I was just trying to see comparison-wise where we are.
Commissioner Kadiki, and I think the other part of that is I don't think they're required to test for the same contaminants we are. So there really isn't any like publicly available information to do that sort of comparison. Again, as Mr. Sines said, they're regulated by the FDA, which is a totally different set of standards. And as Mr. Sines said, most of the bottled water does come from other city water agencies and it gets treated. And I think, the main issue in the bottled water is having a consistent taste, right? Because they're selling a product. And so what they'll do is they'll remove all the minerals out of the water and then add minerals back in to make every bottle taste the same way. Whereas, for us, taste is like a secondary consideration. So. Apples and oranges, I guess.
Is it possible to draw a line where the acceptable limit is? Because like this, one should understand.
President,
I can't understand where we stand.
Sorry, we could add a line on there, President Avanesian, but it's basically the MCL. That's the line, 0.005 milligrams per liter. That first one, that's the acceptable limit. So we're under that. So our wells are Glorieta 3, 4, 6, and Foothill. If that makes sense.
Yes,
so the line's at the top.
The limit.
I guess if you want to see it that way, the line's right at the top.
Okay, so we are below limit.
Yes, well below.
And here are a few best available technologies for lowering these contaminants. For total coliform, protection of the source water to protect to keep coliforms from contaminating the wells. So appropriate placement and construction of these wells helps with that. Maintaining a disinfectant residual throughout the distribution system. Proper maintenance of the distribution system. So when we have a mainline break, we ensure that all those parts and fittings are disinfected and samples are collected after every mainline break. For nitrates, some of the technologies available for controlling them will include blending, such as what we do, reverse osmosis, and ion exchange. For PCEs, some best available technologies for controlling those would include granular activated carbon and a packed tower aeration. And with that, is there any questions?
I have a question. Are we required to post these results online and have our residents take a look? And if so, do we provide a frequently asked questions and answer those questions just like you provided today?
Yes, Commissioner Carrasco. Actually, every year we produce an annual water quality report that shows all the results from the year prior. Speaking right after me, Martin Manucharian, he's gonna explain about the CCR and all the results in that and how that gets sent out. But we do send out an annual report. This PHG report is actually required by the state every 3 years. So we take all the data from the prior 3 years, compile it up into a report, and we send that report off to the Division of Drinking Water. Part of that requirement for the public health goals is to have a public forum where we present this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item.
4B, Water Division Consumer Confidence Report.
President Avanesian, members of the commission. So the next report, this is our annual water quality report. And typically we'll call it like a CCR, Consumer Confidence Report. And we invited Martin Manucharian up to talk about this. He's our water quality supervisor. And I think it's fitting for him to give a talk because he's one of the ones that spends a lot of time putting all those numbers together that come out in that report. So with that, I'll turn it over to him.
Good afternoon, President Avanesian and members of the Commission. My name is Martin Manucharian, and I supervise the team that maintains GWP's compliance with the state and federal water quality standards. In this presentation, I'll talk a little bit about the history of water quality in general and how it came to be regulated in the United States. I'll discuss GWP's compliance with these regulations, and then I will go over GWP's current annual water quality report. Prior to the 19th century, the quality of drinking water was determined based on aesthetics. If it looked, smelled, and tasted okay, then it was probably good to drink. The fact that water, while aesthetically pleasing, could carry and spread illness throughout a population was a matter of science fiction, and in fact, some people were more readily willing to attribute the spread of disease to supernatural causes than to the existence of microscopic organisms living in their drinking water. Even in the first half of the 19th century, waterborne illnesses like cholera were still attributed to miasma or airborne pollutants rather than water. All of this changed all of this changed because of the efforts of a doctor named John Snow. So between 1831 and 1854, tens of thousands of people died in England from cholera. Dr. John Snow believed that the illness was spread by contaminated drinking water, but none of his colleagues believed him until he was able to prove his theory during the 1854 outbreak in Soho, London. By interviewing the friends and family of those affected by the disease, he was able to trace the source of the outbreak to one water pump on Broad Street, as depicted in the photo. When the pump handle was removed, the outbreak came to an immediate end. This was kind of the first act of water quality management. Over time, other scientists built upon the work of John Snow, and eventually the important concepts of environmental responsibility and clean supply of water made their way home to the United States. In 1948, the federal government enacted the Federal Water Pollution Control Act. This was the first major U.S. law to address water pollution. The act was amended in 1972 and renamed the Clean Water Act. It is still in place today and serves to protect the waters of the United States from pollution. In 1974, the federal government enacted the Safe Drinking Water Act. This is the regulation that governs our industry today. The Safe Drinking Water Act focuses on all waters actually or potentially designed for drinking use and authorizes the EPA to establish minimum standards to protect tap water. In California, the regulations set forth by the Safe Drinking Water Act are enforced by the State Water Resources Division's State Water Resources Control Board's Division of Drinking Water. Based on the Safe Drinking Water Act, the EPA created two sets of standards for drinking water, primary and secondary. Primary drinking water standards set limits for contaminants with acute health effects such as viruses and bacteria, as well as those with chronic health effects like carcinogens. Secondary drinking water standards set limit for constituents that affect the aesthetic quality of drinking water. So while they no longer function as the sole indicators of water quality, taste, odor, and color are still regularly monitored and managed. In compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act, as well as other regulations set forth by the state and federal governments, our water quality group here at GWP collects thousands of samples every year. Some samples are tested in-house, and some are sent to a third-party laboratory for testing. A large percentage of our sampling is microbiological in nature and is intended to determine the adequacy of water treatment and the integrity of the distribution system. Also in compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act and in an effort to prevent the growth of bacteria and other contaminants in the water supply, our group diligently works to maintain a chlorine and chloramine residual, depending on the part of the city, throughout the system, as James mentioned before. The city of Glendale has long been a pioneer in the water industry, with new standards being developed at the state and federal levels for emerging contaminants of concern. GWP has been on the forefront of developing treatment technologies to ensure that our residents receive the best quality water possible. To highlight our work and to inform the public about the water that we serve them, we produce an annual water quality report and make it available on our website. Our annual water quality report, also called the Consumer Confidence Report, or the CCR for short, contains the previous year's sampling results for constituents in the following categories: detected regulated contaminants, detected unregulated contaminants, other detected constituents of interest, and a summary of some citywide sampling data. It should be noted that the majority of the sampling that we do is not reflected in the CCR because most of the contaminants we test for have no detectable presence in our water. We also include some additional mandatory language about other specific contaminants, and as of last year's report, we've been including a frequently asked questions section based on the calls that we get most frequently from customers. The CCR is available by July 1st of each year and can be found on our website, or it can be requested as a hard copy by calling 855-550-4497. This concludes my presentation. If you have questions, I'll leave that up there if people want to see that. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Yeah, what are they doing in these pictures and the previous picture?
So,
especially the other one.
let's go back to
this
the beginning.
one.
So here they're actually checking the chlorine residual at that particular site. The gentleman in the blue T-shirt or uniform, he's adding a reagent to a water sample. If the reagent turns the water pink, then there's a detectable chlorine residual. And then the gentleman on the right of the photo, he's actually recording the results on our online database using the iPad. The gentleman at the top it looks like he's collecting another chlorine sample. That seems to be a popular photo. Andre in the middle is smiling at everyone next to his truck. Julie is testing a backflow device, and Mike is calibrating a pump on a chlorination chloramination system that we piloted earlier this summer.
If citizens of the city have a question about their water quality, who should they call?
Me? They can call 818-548-2011, and they'll be directed to me.
Okay. And I live in a neighborhood that's on a hillside, and occasionally our water will get a very strong taste and smell of chlorine. Can you talk about why that would be and why it seems sort of intermittent?
So as James mentioned and I mentioned, we do add chlorine to some of our storage facilities to either boost it or neutralize anything that we may have detected in the water. And occasionally when we add chlorine, some of that chlorine doesn't get a chance to mix in the main body of water and does get into the water supply. So some customers will get a little bit of a chlorine odor or a taste. What we usually recommend is just to flush out the water, and that'll pass.
So run your taps for a few minutes to let the water flow through?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
A couple of operational questions. So are some of these systems automatic? In other words, they have constant monitoring, and then, hence some chlorine injection. Is it automated?
We don't have any chlorine injection. No, we don't have any chlorine injection in our portion of the system. There is a plan to. Did you want to?
Yeah, Commissioner Crosco, what I would add to that, let's see. We do have some automated systems as far as when it comes from the wells. We add hypochlorite there. And we'll paste that. It's based on, when we pump the groundwater out, there should be no demand for the chlorine, so we can paste that flow and set it up. And then those pumps, if the well pump comes on, the sodium hypochlorite pump will come on with it and paste the flow. And then the other area where we have some automation is at the end point of our operable unit, which is our main groundwater treatment plant, we add ammonia to chloraminate the water, and that's automated at that location as well. Yes. And then the water that we purchase from Metropolitan Water District is already chloraminated, so it comes into our system sort of ready to serve already. So.
And then secondly, my second operation question, as we were talking and opening this morning, our commission meeting here, we talked about outages. Are all those pumps electrical, meaning, if we lose power, we lose the ability to pump water?
So to answer that question, so on the
It's
wells, so on the wells, if we lose power at the wells will shut off. So there won't be any issue of having the water introduced without the chlorine residual in it. And the main way that our system operates is from the reservoirs that we've been talking about, the reservoirs and tanks. So if there's an outage and the pump station's off, the water will still be fed from the reservoirs for a certain amount of time until the electric power comes back on. And then at the operable unit, the treatment plant, if the power's out, the treatment plant will shut down as well because the water needs to be fully treated before it can be served. And then there's a whole startup sequence if we lose power at the treatment plant. And then it won't affect our Metropolitan Water District connections because, again, in a similar way to the way our reservoirs work, the water that we're getting from Metropolitan is coming from a higher elevation, so it'll still feed by gravity through those. And then at the pump stations, every pump station is controlled we have our supervisory control and data acquisition system that monitors that. but there's a programmable logic controller, which is like a small computer that runs each pump station. And those have a UPS, an interruptible power supply on them. And so they, even during like short power outages, they'll still be functioning. As far as monitoring and control, it's just the pumps themselves won't be able to come on. So hopefully that answers.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Any question? Okay, next item.
4C, legislative update.
President Avanesi and members of the commission, so Leo Zalian, our legislative analyst, is going to come up and give a presentation on our legislative update.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Avanesi and commissioners. My name is Leo Zalian. I'm here to provide you with legislative update. And to just start off and talk a little about the 2019 legislative calendar. So August 12th is when the legislature will be back from recess. September 13 is the end of legislative session. This is where all the bills have to be passed by. And October 13 is the last day for the governor to sign or veto any bills that have been approved by the legislature. We're going to talk about a few key bills that we're tracking within the energy field and water field. First, we have AB 1054 with Assemblymember Holden. This is the big bill that has to do everything about wildfire. And this one established Wildfire Safety Advisory Board and also it required annual updates to the wildfire mitigation plan. I believe next week you'll get a report on our efforts on the wildfire mitigation plan. And this was signed by the governor last week. And AB 1208 by Assemblymember Ting. This is the utility users tax exemption on residential solar production. For that, it's in the second house, so that means that when the legislature reconvenes, they're going to discuss this bill further. AB 1799, this is a study on natural gas volatility. The status for this bill is it became a 2-year bill, and this was by Assemblymember Friedman. And AB 1424 by Assemblymember Berman, and this is the EV station integration additional payment option. So this is on the second house, so it's going to come back for the next cycle. To continue, SB 457 by Senator Husio. This is to promote in-state production of distribution of biomethane. This is also in the second house. And SB 560 by Senator McGarry. This is to additional requirements for the integration lines during wildfires. And this is also in the second house. And SB 676 by Senator Bradford. This is a study on integration of EVs to the electric grid. This is also in the second house. And SB 772, procurement of pumped storage energy. This became a 2-year bill as well. Next, we're going to review some water bills. AB 1180.
Sorry, Leo, before you go to
Yes,
the
sir.
water bill, what does it mean if it says second house?
So meaning that it passed the House of Origin. Let's say if it's a Senate bill, so it passed the Senate. Now it's on the second house, which is Assembly needs to also approve it before it goes to the governor's desk again. That's the second house. And then the 2-year bill, meaning that the bill didn't pass the House of Origin, and it's going to come back next legislative session for more deliberation before it goes back for a vote again. Thank you. Sure. So AB 1180 by Assemblymember Friedman. This is adoption of backflow protection measures. This is also in the second house, so it'll be back in the when the session reconvenes. AB 60 by Assemblymember Friedman again establishes water meter accuracy standards. This became a 2-year bill, so we'll see it in the next legislative session. AB 1414 by Assemblymember Friedman again, streamlining water reports deadlines. This is in the second house, so we'll see this soon. And SB 134 by Senator Hertzberg, this meets set performance standards for volume of water loss. So this is in the second house. We'll see what happens to this bill shortly. And a few more bills in the water side, SB 200, which is to assist failing water systems. This also granted $130 million to help with failing water systems, and this was signed by the governor also last week. SB 204 by Senator Dodd required additional noticing for public projects. This became a 2-year bill, so we'll most likely see it back in the next legislative session. And SB 414, this is to consolidate any failing water systems that are out there, and this is going to be back for when the session reconvenes in September. And that's all I have for today. Happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Leo, question, be interesting to know on each of these bills what the city's position is, whether, as it's going along, whether the city is supportive or in opposition or has no position. Is that available?
We don't have that right now, but we can get that to you at a later date, sir.
And I think it'd be interesting to have it as part of the presentation in the future.
Of course.
And I guess the only bills we're seeing are those that have already been approved by one of the two houses or are going to come back the second year. I take it there are a whole lot more bills that during the course of the year that have been introduced but haven't been acted on.
Of course, sir. There are about 150 bills or so we're tracking. These are the bills that could implement, if it passed, will impact us in some way, shape, or form. And these are the bills kind of are in a way of getting through the legislative process.
Yeah, I don't think we want to hear about 150 different bills.
Correct. This is a brief summary of the bills that are most important to us.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you for keeping it brief.
Thank you.
For the SB 200, which got signed, you indicated, are different cities or utilities going to get some of this 130 million allocated funds?
Correct, sir. I don't believe we will be impacted with those, but those are for water systems that are failing. So if they're not meeting compliance, they will be able to apply for those funds so they can assist their systems.
And just to clarify, Chapter mean has been approved by both houses and is pending
And signed by the
governor's
governor.
approval.
Correct.
Thank you.
And also signed by the governor.
So it's actually law.
It's law.
Getting in the books.
Just to follow up on Commissioner Watson's point, it'd be interesting to note on the chaptered bills, how does it affect us in particular? As a follow-up, I think it would be good to know.
Sure. Of course.
Thank you.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Next item.
4D, customer service update.
President Avanesi and members of the commission, Ms. Tammy Valier, our customer service administrator, is going to come up and give us an update on her
Good afternoon,
department.
Commissioners. Tammy Valier, Customer Services Administrator. Today, I want to review some of the productivity and performance metrics for last year, and then I want to share with you the impact of this month's power outage that had on our customer call volume. For customer service highlights, I've listed some of the primary tasks handled on a daily basis. At the top are our direct customer contacts as well as interactions received by email. Sometimes they come through the web and sometimes through email. Overall, we had 170,000 customer contacts. That's about a 2% decrease from last year. Both telephone calls and cashiering transactions were the areas where we saw a decrease. We do believe that we'll see more of a decrease this year as we bring our new customer portal on board. That should be in place by December. On the payment and transaction side, we have a lot of features that customers have been asking for as far as quick pay, ability to schedule future payments, and automatically enroll in our auto payment or direct payment program. We did see a 26% increase in our web contacts. The phase 2 of the customer portal will help us with that. They'll offer more of an automated process for the back office procedures since it'll be integrated completely with our billing system. Next, under the billing and account maintenance, we generated almost 600,000 bills, and this includes transferring meter data to the billing system, working the exceptions, scheduling any field investigation orders, exporting it to our bill print vendor and posting it to the system. And then with each of these processes, we have a number of control steps and reconciliation processes that we have to go to make sure that everything's accurate. And I just wanted to mention that as far as the billing and the direct customer contact, it's not just water and sewer, water and electric. We also bill for rubbish, sewer, and hazardous waste. So all of those processes, as well as on the payment side, and even in the call center, we have to know all of the information and rates for those other departments. We did have a decrease to our electric meter installations from 4,900 to almost 3,500. The prior year, we did have more construction projects that came online, but we do think we might have an uptick this year based to the AB 2299, which made it easier for the accessory dwelling units. Although they don't mandate that additional meters are put on those units, we do see that a lot of landlords are inquiring about that so they could have a separate utility bill. Next we have for the transfer deposit, billing adjustments. There's a variety of reasons why we have billing adjustments. It could be anything from a landlord who had a utility service in their name and a tenant moved in and didn't put it in their name, so that there has to be an adjustment made for the accurate date. It could be an estimation error, a number of reasons why we might have to adjust a bill after it's actually been generated. This year what we saw was the fire department increase their inspections, and I'll talk a little bit later about the fire billing that we do. But they may go out there and see that the business has other hazardous materials on site, or the business was closed and we've already made the billing, so we'll have to adjust that off. So that was the reason for the increase in adjustments this year. For transfers, deposits, and refunds, we monitor any account that has a deposit, and once they've made their payments for 12 months on time, then we'll go ahead and apply that deposit back to the account. If there's a credit balance or an amount owing, then we'll go ahead and we'll do some skip tracing and see if we could transfer that to an active account before having to issue a check back to them. If not, then we have to write that balance off of our account receivables, and then we issue a check through the city's financial system. So we're actually doing that process in both systems. Delinquent notices have remained the same from the prior year, and our disconnections have been reduced. That's really good news. And overall, we have seen a reduction in the accounts delinquent at 60 days. For the collection agency, I put an asterisk there because it appears that we sent more, we assigned more accounts to our collection agency in 2019. Actually, the last 3 months of the year, we had a little bit of an issue trying to encrypt and send the file to the collection agency. So they actually were referred in 2019. Had that not happened, we would have seen a reduction there too. So overall, we've seen a reduction in all of our delinquencies.
Excuse me. I have a general question here. I mean, do you have any correction factor for number of population? I mean, number of population, of course, is not constant. So does that affect this?
I'm sorry, can you please repeat that?
Population of Glendale, when it increases or decreases, you have a factor to apply or not?
Well, somewhat you'll see this in this next one for the field and customer service request. We had an increase from last year, and the majority of those were new move-ins into Glendale. We had an additional 300 move-ins. And then, of course, some of the meter, the prior one, on the prior meter installations, we did see an increase in 2018, and a lot of that had to do with the new construction and projects that came online, because we had to add a new meter for each of those. Is that answering your question?
My question was about number of population. For example, if 5% has been increased, your number is maybe is better than what is reflected here, or vice versa.
I think the question is relative to, for example, delinquency compared to the number of population. Is that ratio staying the same, some sort of a percentage?
I haven't actually looked at it that way, but that is a very good way to look at it.
So you're assuming the population is constant?
I think we would look more at the number of customer service rather than the population. I'll do a comparison and I'll see if that actually does have a relation. I'm going to say I don't think so, basically because it's not just what we've written off, but it's more of the accounts receivable on our aging that customers are paying quicker. And that's not necessarily based on the number of people, but when they're actually paying.
Thank you.
But I'll take a deeper dive into that.
And President Avanesian, I would also think, for us as the utility, it really is more based on the number of customer accounts as opposed to population. And as Ms. Valier was saying, there was that increase, I think, in a lot of increase in multifamily dwelling units, and each one of those has a separate electric meter, and that would increase some of our workload. But and I'm not sure, but I'm sure some of the delinquent accounts are commercial accounts as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I know it's not just residential. So population on these numbers might have less of an effect.
So the number of meters could go up, just for sake of argument, like 5 or 10%. But if your delinquency rate only goes up 0.5% or 1%, that shows that relationship that doesn't correspond. In other words, just because we have more meters doesn't mean we're having a higher proportion of delinquencies.
Okay, so moving on, for our field section, they completed 4,600 customer requests, and as I just mentioned, that increase was primarily due to the additional move-ins that we saw. For revenue protection, we had 43 cases, which was just about exactly what we had the prior year. Most of these tamperings are where they upgraded the panel, they didn't pull the proper permits, we may have gone out there, the meter was missing, or it had already been moved to another a new panel. Sometimes we'll go out there and the seal's been broken, the lock ring's been broken, and the meter's laying on the floor. So that's a $271 penalty, and then in addition to that, they'd have to pay for any of the actual cost of the equipment, as well as any administrative time to do the investigation and do any back billing if that was necessary. Electric meter upgrades and maintenance. This is a variety of work that we do in the field. It includes opt-out reads, firmware updates, meter programming. For example, the recent change that we had July 1st, which changed the peak period time band for our time of use customers. Each of those meters, we needed to go out and actually physically touch the meter and reprogram it to a new program ID. And then under fire, I've included this section just to share with you a service we're providing that maybe you're not aware that we do. The fire department permits and regulates the businesses that handle and store hazardous waste or generate hazardous waste or discharge industrial water waste. Annually, we create a consolidated bill for them, and all of the fees depend on what type of business it is. So in reality, each bill is pretty much a custom bill depending on what that unique business is doing. So we we generate those bills, and then once the bill is paid in full, we issue the permit to the business. And then if the bills are not paid, we help them with the delinquencies and sending violation notices.
The fees that are collected for the fire services that you provide, they go into the general fund or they go to the fire department? Where do the fees go?
They go back to the fire department. I believe that's actually an enterprise fund. Okay. I'm not sure. They definitely don't come to GWP, although they do pay for all of the work that we do. They pay directly for.
That was the question I was going to get.
They do.
Okay.
Question, back up on the revenue protection.
Mm-hmm.
Does that include energy theft?
It does. We did not have any bypasses this past year. We have had many in the past. We, of course, do all of the back billing, and depending on the situation, we will prepare a report and work with the police department that will then present it to the district attorney's office and prosecute if necessary. We also have a meter data analytics system that will help us detect some of this. Next, these are some of our performance metrics. Our average talk time was just over 4 minutes. We did not meet our target there, but this is not really a measure that we are very rigid on. It really depends on what's going on with the utility. If we offer a new program, last summer, for example, when we had extremely high heat, we had a lot of calls that were taking a lot of time. depending on what's going on, this would be an acceptable talk time. When we get the new customer portal in, I anticipate that our reps are going to really upsell the use of that system. So we don't necessarily want them to get off the phone in 3.5 minutes. What we would look for is nothing really unusual is going on and our talk time is high, and then we would drill down and maybe look to see if there was some issue with some of the training that they may need, or one particular rep that was taking extra long on a call. So it's an important measure. Almost every call center measures this, but it really is a little bit unique to us. For the abandoned queue time, we did very well with the average time to answer a call. It was just 36 seconds. We only abandoned 2.6% calls, and almost 80% of all of our calls were answered in 30 seconds or less. I think in May I discussed a little bit about some of our accomplishments, and this is a direct result of our redesigning our overflow call center and structure within the department. Almost 90% of our emails were responded to within 48 hours. E-bill only customers. So we have a target of increasing the enrollment by 20% each year, which we did, but 14% is still pretty low. We would like that to be much higher, and we think, again, the customer portal will really drive this up. We've talked to many of our customers, and we encourage them to go on e-bill, and the reason they give us is that they need that bill to remind them to pay the bill every month. And our current system does not push notifications out, and this new system will. It'll push notifications out before it's due. It'll push notifications out letting them know it's late. So we really think that this is what customers have been asking for, and we'll be able to deliver it to them. For bill accuracy, we are just under our target. Our goal for years and years was 99.9%, which is where we're at. But the new first quartile is 99.95, so of course we are striving to be in the first quartile. And then right off to revenue, we again met our target with only 0.15% of our customers uncollectible at 180 days. So we really almost, I think every year we are in the first quartile for this category. We have a very strong collection strategy. And then just finally, I wanted to share the peak in our call volume as a result of the outage. So this is the call volume for the month of July. We average about 400 calls per day. On July 24th, we were offered almost 2,300 calls, and we were able to handle 1,868 of them. Staff did a tremendous job. We had everybody on deck answering calls, the call center, the utility operations center, our billing department, admin, clerical, every single one of us were on the telephones taking those calls. It was a 9.5% abandon rate, which seems high, but if you look at the next slide, our call volume by hour, you can see that over half of the calls came in within the first 2 hours. So it really would have been pretty impossible to do any better than what we did. So we're pretty proud of how staff handled that. Overall, our average wait time was just 1 minute and 19 seconds, and the longest call wait was just 14.5 minutes.
May I ask a question on that incident that you got all those phone calls about? Other than asking, when is it going to come back, or I lost my power, is there any particular questions that customers raised, such as my oxygen pump stopped working, what am I going to do? Something to that extent that you could share with the commission?
Sure. You know, we did not, well, I was even answering calls, and I didn't get anything like that. But several calls I had were about, I have an elderly parent at the house, and it's pretty warm, what should I do? And we were offering the locations for the cooling centers for them to move to. And most of them just said, no, I think we're okay. For now. But at least they had that information available. A lot of people were concerned about their food in the refrigerator, and it's pretty safe, and for up to 4 hours if you just don't keep opening it, or put some of the stuff in the freezer if you want it to last longer. So we were just trying to help them with the information that we had.
Okay.
And almost all of our customers were very understanding.
Thank you.
I just want to compliment your ability to handle such a high volume of calls and respond to it so quickly and be prepared to handle it. If the average call time or response time in answering was, you said just over a minute
A minute,
and a half?
19 seconds.
And I know the longest was, there were some that were considerably longer, but that's a very impressive performance by the department.
It was a team effort for sure. Great. Any other questions?
Quick question, do we put out a customer satisfactory survey, and does that occur on a regular basis?
We have one every other year. It's for business, and every other year it's for residents. One of the things that we're really looking forward to is the new phone system that I discussed in May. That was supposed to be the initiation. The project kickoff was in July, so I'm hoping to have that in as well by the end of the year, because we want more consistent and constant customer feedback. I mean, we definitely want that. So the new phone system will have after call survey, where a customer can opt in to have a survey thereafter. And then we'll also be doing some type of field follow-up survey. So when one of our customer field reps goes out and maybe helps somebody with a leak or something like that, then they can leave them with a card and they could give feedback. And then as well as our web request, if somebody sends in a web request and then we send them a response, they can get a follow-up survey via the email. So we're really looking forward to that. It's just a matter of getting that in place.
I think that's great. I think that's perfect. Looking at, the feedback from our customers are important, and then benchmarking them on how we could consistently, get better, I think is key. So it sounds like we're headed that way. Thank you.
Absolutely. And one of our number one metrics that we would like is first call resolution, which is extremely hard to measure, but with customer surveys, it makes it quite a bit easier.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you very much.
4E, water resource update.
President Avanesian, members of the commission, Michael DeGhetto, Chief AGM for Water. And boy, it's been a little over a year since I gave a presentation on conservation and water, so I was going to go ahead and just really do the whole overview. And again, so approximately 200,000 residents, and I don't know if we've spoken about this before, but there are some Glendale residents that live in Crescenta Valley Water District service area. So sometimes the numbers that I have in water might be a little bit less than in electric. And definitely like our service connections, we've got 33,000 water services. But the thing to think about on that is, there's 22,000 of those are single family, but there's 48,000 multifamily units. And that's because many of the apartments don't have individual water meters, where they might have an individual electric meter. City of Glendale is one of the founding members of Metropolitan Water District in 1928. We're a pumper in the San Fernando Basin and the Verdugo Basin, and it varies between 30 and 40% of our water is local water supplies. We're co-owner of the LA Glendale Water Reclamation Plant, and our first recycled water use was in 1978. And about 7% of our demand is local recycled water. And we currently have 82 recycled water meters, and that water is used for irrigation, dual plumbing, and for industrial uses.
I'm just curious, how does the 7% demand on local recycled water compare with other local communities, water districts?
It's comparable to Burbank. Pasadena doesn't have any recycled water yet, so it'd be 0%. Crescenta Valley Water District doesn't have any recycled water. So it's actually a pretty high number compared to a lot of other agencies. City of LA is such a large agency that their reclamation plants are actually in different areas, and so their recycled water might be around those reclamation plants, not throughout the whole city. So
Does that just count recycled water that is recycled by the city, or does that include individual customers who might have a recycled water system built into their dwelling? Sorry, does that include a residence or commercial properties that might have recycled water?
That's just recycled water that goes through our wastewater collection system and gets reclaimed at the wastewater reclamation plant. So.
Okay, so there could be additional folks out there who are recycling water on their properties, but they're not included in that number.
Yeah, and that would be under, the regulations for that. It might be called a gray water system, where you use water from
Rain gutters for your yard.
for the yard or from the washing machine. So, yeah.
Oh, excuse me. So here, obviously, the commercial water is not included. So how is the...
Commercial is not included. No, commercial is part of the 33,000. There's 33,000 total water services.
That is
yeah.
Commercial.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then just a further breakdown on those percentages. So San Fernando Basin, about 31% of our water comes from the San Fernando Basin. And we're limited to the amount of water that we can extract from the San Fernando Basin based on the adjudication that happened in that area. City of LA brought a lawsuit in the 1950s, and it finally got settled towards the end of the 1970s. And Glendale and Burbank have what's called a return flow credit. So it's 20% of the total water sales in our system is what we're allowed to pump out of that basin. Verdugo Basin's a prescriptive right, so we get, it's around 3,400 acre feet, but we're only able to pump about 800 acre feet, and that's because of declining groundwater levels in that basin. Again, the LA Glendale Water Reclamation Plant, it's about 7%, and we're entitled to 50% of all the water that's generated from that plant.
Are we at capacity from the plant, or could, if there was more users, could we provide more water?
We could use more recycled water, but the issue that's come up is related to the State Water Resources Control Board actually limiting the amount of water that can be diverted from any river. So, and I'll talk about it a little bit, but we had to file a wastewater change petition with the state's Division of Water Rights to secure the amount of water that we have per agreement to provide to Pasadena. We couldn't just start using that water. So there's a whole process now to go through. 5 years ago, it wouldn't have been an issue, but now it's like a very large focus. So to answer your question, yes, the water's available, but whether or not the state will let us use it for recycling purposes would take a long process, again, to go through. And the reason I show this way is it's really customer demand that determines how much water we need to supply. And then so whatever's left when you deduct customer demand from our local sources is the amount of metropolitan water that we purchase. So about 58% in this, and it varies on customer use. So sometimes I'll get asked, we should participate in desalinization projects, and usually my answer is that Glendale's not very close to the ocean, but it's actually natural desalinization. So all the water that we get is basically evaporated, and it falls as snow. And then we collect that water through the State Water Project or the Colorado River Aqueduct, bring that through Metropolitan, or it comes down as precipitation in our groundwater basins. And the reason I say natural is because we're not using a lot of energy to do the desalinization process on it, like some other agencies might do. So to talk a little bit more about the local sources. So we're part of the Upper Los Angeles River area, and the two basins we pump from, as I said, was San Fernando Basin. City of Los Angeles, based on the lawsuit, has all the native water rights. So basically all the water that comes from any precipitation in San Fernando Basin and its watershed belongs to the City of Los Angeles. And we're limited to 20% of the delivered water in that area. And it includes the recycled water. And it also turns out that all the water from San Fernando Basin that we serve is part of an EPA Superfund cleanup project called the Glendale Operable Unit. And we remove the volatile organic compounds and chromium-6 from the water before serving it. And in the Verdugo Basin, as I mentioned, it's a prescriptive right, which just means it's a volume. It doesn't vary, it's not a percentage. And their production there is low due to declining water levels in that basin.
Before you move on, can you define what a return flow credit is?
Yeah, it's literally all of our metered sales, 20% of that's how much we can pump from the San Fernando Basin. And LA is essentially responsible for maintaining the water level in the basin. So if we go over that, we have a physical solution rate that it's called that we pay LA Department of Water and Power for any amount of water that we pump over our return flow credit in any one given year. And we do. Because of the operable unit and the consent decree related to that, we pump about 7,500 acre feet or so through the treatment plant, like we're mandated to pump that amount, and our return flow credits are around 5,000 acre feet. So there is a physical solution rate that we have to pay to LA for that water that's above that 20%.
Okay.
Does that mean we open up the books and share with them, the consumption amounts so that they realize what that?
Yeah, we report to them once a year.
Yeah.
Okay. To the water master. So the Upper Los Angeles River area has a water master that's contracted, and he reports to the judge that oversees the adjudication, and then the administrative committee is made up of basically the defendants in the judgment. So Glendale, Burbank, LA, City of San Fernando, and Crescenta Valley Water District. And we make up the administrative committee. And there is a water master report it's publicly available information that's on the web as well. And then the local sources, and I like to talk about this. Glendale's been ahead of the curve for a very long time. So in 1968, we partnered with City of LA to look at building a reclamation plant. And in 1976, the plant first went online, and it's a joint LADWP and Glendale system, the first part of the distribution system. And our first reclaim service was in 1978. We built a dedicated line for the cooling towers at Grayson Power Plant. So we've been using recycled water since 1978. And since 1992 is like the first major expansion of our system, we've invested over $20.3 million in our system. And just recently, since last year, we've got, it's called the 1211 wastewater change petition order was issued by the Division of Water Rights, which allows for the expansion into Pasadena and some more expansion within Glendale. Basically to have less water come out of Lagwarp and go down the river. We've got permission to use that water in our system. And in the map on the bottom, and I usually talk about this, if you just take a map of the city of Glendale, every street's got a pipe in it, a potable pipe, right? Because if there's water at a house or wherever it is, there's water service there. But this map here, those are literally the only pipes for the recycled water.
For recycled?
Yeah, for recycled. And then our
So
imported.
who are the major users of the recycled water? I mean, it seems like a big development for their landscaping. Is that how it works?
So Oakmont Country Club, Caltrans, Grayson Power Plant, Parks Department. Parks Department has recycled water kind of all over the city. And Glendale Unified School District is a big user. Disney's a big user. Glendale City College is a big user. So it, Forest Lawn is a big user as well. Yep.
Quick question. So last year, LA County passed Measure W, I believe it was called, to
Yes.
capture storm water and put that in place. How does that affect us, and how does that come into play?
That really affects our Public Works Department and the stormwater collection system, and having funding to do upgrades on that and to comply with, it's called the Enhanced Watershed Management Plan that the city signed on to with LA County and other agencies. And it's basically to really clean up the stormwater before it gets into the storm drain and into the river. So that measure helps provide funding for projects like that. Some of the enhancements related to that involve like the Green Street projects and projects that'll help percolate some of that water into the groundwater basins, but so indirectly it'll benefit us.
Oh, excuse me. How is the price compared? I mean, recycled water price is different from?
Right now it's a little bit, I think it's a little bit less than Tier 1, or it's around the Tier 1 price. When we did our cost of service analysis last year, we looked at the recycled water cost and updated those rates as well as all the other rates. So it's a little bit less, I think, than Tier 1 or Tier 2. I don't remember exactly, but.
Although quality might not be as good, but you invest a lot of money to.
So doing the cost of service analysis, one of the big drivers is the value of our assets and the depreciation rate. And a big part of the recycled system was put in place in the early 90s. So that as far as the depreciation expense, it's very low, as well as through the sewer rates, the water has to get treated anyway. So that makes the cost of the water low to begin with. And then the other part about the quality of the water is a little bit less because we don't treat it to drinking water standards. So like the treatment expense is a little bit lower as well.
Is there a tier system to the recycled water?
No,
or is it
there's just one
flat fee?
tier because there's not really a peaking factor related to that. Yeah. And then as far as our imported sources, like I mentioned, it's natural desalinization, and what we have is like a big collection system to collect the water and bring it down here to the Southland. There's the Upper Sierra, Lower Sierra, and the Colorado River Basin, and there's a state water project which gets water through the Bay Delta. And whenever the water fix or whatever the newer version of that gets built, it'll help firm up those supplies on the state water project. And then we've got water from the Colorado River Aqueduct, which was like the initial aqueduct that Metropolitan built when Glendale and the other cities, formed MWD to bring imported water into the area. And one thing that's useful or beneficial or helps a lot about this is the Colorado River water is basically almost more like a prescriptive right, with more of a constant flow. And then the state water project, that flow varies depending on, more so every year, on what Department of Water Resources allocates based on the snow level and the snowpack. So right now, the outlook, so the Upper Sierra has 163% snowpack, Lower Sierra is 153%, Oroville's at 97% full, the San Luis Reservoir is 73%, Castaig's 94%, and on the Colorado River side, the snowpack in the basin's 133% of normal, Lake Powell's about 53%, and Lake Mead's about 40% full. And with those prescriptive limits in Colorado River, recently the drought contingency plan was ratified by all the states and Congress related to how to divide up the water in that watershed. And the thing that was very important for California and for Metropolitan specifically in Glendale is it allows everyone will start cutting back sooner, but it allows Metropolitan to still extract any of the intentionally created storage that's in Lake Mead. So when there's a high amount of water available on the State Water Project, Metropolitan's able to shift sort of production or flow and use more State Water Project water and less Colorado River water, which allows us basically to store water in Lake Mead. And prior to that drought contingency plan going into place, that water was that was at risk. Because when the cutback started, it would have just been cutbacks and that water wouldn't have been available. So that's really good news for everybody in the region. And then Diamond Valley Lake is a metropolitan reservoir that was built, completed in 1999 with about a $2 billion local investment, and it's 94% full right now. So all those resources that Metropolitan has in place kind of allows that flexibility of when you have a very wet year to store a lot of water, to save it for when you have the dry years that come. And then as far as conservation goes, and this graph is getting pretty long, but this is a graph I started in 2015 when we had the water supply shortage. And basically the red line shows the cumulative reduction. We're still 18% below what we would have produced in the same time period in 2013. So everybody in the city's still been conserving, basically. And that red line's kind of like the running average. And then our annual trends. So 2013, 2014 are the top two lines. And 2013 was the year during the water supply shortage that we could compare to. The red line is when we went to the mandatory 2-day-a-week watering. So that's why that red line is like a really abnormal looking line. And then since then, 16, 17, 18, 19 are all kind of clustering around, like I showed in that other graph, about 18% below where we were in that 2013 years, with 2019 and 2017 where we had really wet winters, like in January and February. Which is why there's that big flex in February right there, that big dip. And like I talk about, the biggest driver for us is single-family residential, the biggest swing in demands. So when we talk about summer single-family residential in 12, 13, and 14 versus what's been happening 16, 17, and 18, it really does seem like folks are still maybe on 3 days a week or 2 days a week watering and haven't really crept back up to what the levels were before that, with that one anomaly year in 2015 when we were on that mandatory 2 days a week. Let's see. And then just to look more at single family residential, again, it's kind of the same dark yellow graph where we can look at, we started 3 days per week, and it kind of seemed like demand didn't go down very much. But when we went to that 2 days a week, when Governor Brown was standing on the snowpack in his shorts or whatever without a jacket on, we started 2 days a week, and demands really dropped off. But it really just follows temperature. I think it's pretty much everybody looks outside, sees how their plants are doing, and it's like you up the irrigation or lower the irrigation, and it follows the temperature, except for those big dips, which when there's really high precipitation events, and definitely since that shortage in 2015, it seems like everybody's been really good at turning off their sprinklers. And like I've talked about before on this graph, I'm showing really the rain coming down, right? So it starts at zero, goes, and the numbers go up on the side, but it really lines up with those big dips in 2017 and 2019. So, and besides all that, so our most important resources, like the staff that came today, our engineering staff, our quality staff, the staff there fixing this major main break. One thing that happened since last year, so we'd always been, the State Water Resources Control Board Division of Drinking Water is our main regulator, and they rate the complexity of each system, and we had been our distribution system had been a D5, which is the highest rating or the most complex rating. And because when we added the chromium-6 treatment at our treatment plant, we went from a T4 to a T5 treatment system as well. So, our staff, we've got 16 people with a D5, and right now we've got 2 people with a T5, and they both got that since our rating went up. And so those exams, staff take on their own time. They have to maintain contact hour training, basically, to maintain their certifications. They do that all on their own time. So I think, we're in a really good situation to have this level of qualified staff in our utility. And in addition to that, and I gotta say it, we've got 8 PE licenses between us as well, so. I'll take questions, but, we talk about to support conservation, and I think we've been doing sustainability before that was the term that everybody used to call it sustainability. So I don't know if we need to update our signs or whatever, but I'll leave it at that. Take any questions.
Thank you.
When would we have any predictions about anticipated rainfall for the coming winter?
I know we don't have any yet, as far as that far out. It'll be closer, what was it? Like October, maybe kind of that area. There might be some more predictions related to that. But basically the way the storage is right now, Metropolitan's resources, it's almost the most storage that they've had. It's about 3.3 million acre feet, which is almost like 3 years worth of storage. So, having just even an average winter would be really great to kind of just maintain the system.
So, is the presumption then that the drought is really, truly, completely over? Or can drought cycle where you have, because we had a number of lean years in a row, then we've had a couple of very good years in terms of rainfall and precipitation. But could we sort of slide backwards again into drought very easily? Or is it the situation where the prediction is that we're kind of out of the woods?
Yeah, so one of the things that came out in 2015 is just really, at least as water managers, not even talking about drought. That was truly a shortage, and everybody needed to conserve. With Metropolitan and the investments we've made, like in Diamond Valley Lake and all that kind of stuff, then it's just more about managing the water supply. So Metropolitan, already has a program in place where we can do restrictions kind of agency-wide if needed, just based on Metropolitan storage, almost regardless of if it's drought or not. So I would say, if anything, it'll probably be more extreme fluctuations as far as dry periods versus really wet periods, which just gets back to having that kind of that reliability built in and planning ahead for that. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but, I just look at it more as, do we have the water available? As opposed to, is it a drought or not?
And what are the fail-safes that we have built in to plan ahead for volatility in water supply?
Yeah, it's basically, the chart that I
Right.
showed, it's really having, four supplies, right? It's having a supply from the Sierras, it's having a supply from the Colorado River Basin, it's having our local supplies, and it's utilizing our recycled water. So those are, and then making investments in things like Diamond Valley Lake to have that local storage available, which is part of the thing about being part of a larger agency, being able to leverage kind of all those resources in order to be able to build something that costs $2 billion. And I think then the other component is conservation, continued conservation. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Five, oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Commission may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The general manager may refer the matter to appropriate staff for investigation and report.
Is there any cards?
I don't have any cards.
Okay. So let's go to next item.
6, agenda forecast.
Do you have any comments on agenda forecast?
Is a special meeting just because the Monday is on Labor Day, but there's a need to have a meeting that month anyway?
Exactly.
Thank you.
So next item, if there is no comments.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
We're
Adjourn.
There's one thing I wanna be, and that's a hound dog man. Hound dog man, I wanna be a hound